Good morning, everybody. My name is Leslie Stoffels and I'm the MAWA Primary Publications Officer, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to our conference of 2019. Before beginning, I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Just a few housekeeping issues. The workshops will be conducted in the botanical rooms. Go down the escalator near the registration desk. Studio rooms are up the escalators near the Austral room, and the meeting rooms on the left-hand side of the corridor that you walk down, and ballroom A to C are right here. Internet access is available. Please use the password 2019 MAWA in capital letters, please. All meals will be served in the Austral suite with our exhibitors. In response to 2018 feedback, Crown will not be providing disposable plastic water bottles this year. We have sourced a reusable water bottle for each person, and water stations are located in the Austral suite, the foyer and outside the Crown ballroom too. Please remember to bring your bottle if coming for more than one day, because we won't be giving you another one. There will be a series of prize draws over the next few days. All winners are randomly selected and will be notified by text message or email. Prizes can be collected at the MAWA stand at the end of the day. A communication email will be sent post-conference to inform us of all the winners. This year, This year we have an exhibitor's passport for your conference bag. Visit each exhibitor and get them to stamp your passport. Place your completed passport in the box at the MAWA stand. We will draw the winner by Friday the 22nd of November. The winner will receive a night's accommodation for two at the Crown Towers. This can be used at any time in the next 12 months. Please remember to join us for our sundowner this afternoon. There'll be a quick game show Manic Math conducted by MathMate. The sundowner will take place in the Austral suite. If you need any help or have any questions, please see the MAWA staff at the registration desk or the MAWA stand at the Austral suite. They're all wearing green shirts, they're not hard to miss. Our keynote sponsor, we'd like to thank Corwin Australia for their generous sponsorship of Penny Crossland as a keynote speaker. I invite Lynn from Corwin Australia to give us a brief 5-minute presentation.
Good morning, everyone. Can I say that being surrounded by people who have committed themselves to one or more days of professional learning to think deeply about mathematics would absolutely be described as my happy place. And I'm very honoured to be here today. Corwin are thrilled to sponsor our keynote speaker this morning, Penny Crossland, and I am familiar with some of Penny's work, and I am sitting very excited to hear more about how creativity and critical thinking can be embedded into the lives of our mathematicians. Curiosity is a core component of thinking critically. And in my family, we embrace curiosity in mathematics through an annual competition. It's the annual pumpkin growing competition, Exhibit A. The competition started between my dad and his siblings and now extends from my 92-year-old grandmother, who has quite a few tricks up her sleeve, to my 5-year-old twin nephews, who have far less tricks, but they still seem to be able to grow pumpkins. Everyone gets issued with the same number of seeds from the same batch, and they need to be planted within the same time period and harvested within the same time period. And after that, it's up to you. There is a prize of family bragging rights for a range of categories, and what started as only one category, which was heaviest pumpkins, has now extended to roundest, brightest orange flesh, and most interesting shape after my uncle successfully grew one around a post. Within the family, people have spent varying amounts of time working out ways to deliberately accelerate growth. Their approaches scatter from the 5-year-old approach, which is throw them into the garden and cross your fingers, through to my uncle's strategically constructed raised beds of carefully curated composted soil. And whilst I know that pumpkins grow nearly anywhere, there are decisions that I can make that will have a greater impact on the final result. So bear with me, because I'm a bit obsessed with pumpkins at the moment. There are some things that I can influence. My pumpkins will be even better if I have slightly acidic and well-drained soil and lots of water and maximum sunlight. I can choose the right approach at the right time. I can cover those poor little cold pumpkins on those cold nights and during heavy rain. I can protect them from the wind. I can remove the vines so that I can direct the nutrients to the right pumpkins. And I can actually take the flowers and enable fertilisation. I can make sure that my pumpkins are growing, not by chance, but by intentional actions on my part. So why am I telling you about my obsession with pumpkins? Well, because you are literally a captive audience. And quite frankly, my family are sick and tired of hearing about how I have won the heaviest pumpkin competition 2 years running. Thank you, thanks. And can I say I love that for my uncle, who does put a lot of time and effort into making sure his grow. Secondly, I want you to imagine if we replaced pumpkins with your learners. I can make decisions that influence the growth of the pumpkins. What might be the decisions, the conditions, the experiences that you can make so that your learners experience growth in the form of progress? What might be even better if? So in addition to being a champion pumpkin grower, I'm also a professional learning leader with Corwin Australia, and part of my role is to share our work at conferences like today. But one of the most rewarding aspects of my role is partnering with schools to support educators through facilitating face-to-face workshops and visiting their schools. I don't think it would be an understatement to say that educators have a multitude of programs, practices, Pinterest suggestions about what we could be doing or should be doing. It would be even better if. I saw recently that teachers make a minimum of 4 decisions per minute, over 1,500 decisions a day. Many of these decisions are directly related to ensuring that our learners are making progress. So how are we deciding if what we're implementing is the right approach at the right time? At Corwin, we partner with educators to further develop their ability to make decisions about practices that ensure every student is learning, not by chance, but by design. We equip educators with current research by providing collaborative learning experiences and relevant examples of practice so that they can choose the right approach at the right time. We are teachers. We currently partner with over 1,000 schools across Australia, and for the majority of these schools, this partnership is focused on a minimum of 3 years, and the focus is on deep implementation and evaluation to actually determine if the professional learning is achieving what it set out to do. We are passionate about learners and learning, particularly creating visible learners, learners who can articulate where they're at in their learning and what their next steps are, and ultimately learners who can see themselves as their own teachers. And we pride ourselves on being responsive to those we partner with, and to that end, we are very excited to be here. In this maths space, we are extending our professional learning offerings further into mathematics. This new research-informed offering, Visible Learning for Mathematics, has been created to support educators through a combination of face-to-face workshops, led by passionate mathematics educators, virtual coaching opportunities, and interactive sessions that encourage you to go deeper and deeper into some of those core principles of effective mathematics teaching. All of these have been designed specifically for Australian schools by researchers and Australian teachers. These professional learning experiences capture what the research tells us about mathematical tasks that are effective, about how we can promote talk between our students in our mathematics classrooms, about the role of metacognition, about ensuring that our students engage in rigour, about teacher clarity, about the intended learning, and the ways that we can ensure we are implementing the right approach at the right time. These experiences translate research into practices that actually apply to all areas of mathematics and all year levels. And we partner with schools from 4-year-olds through to 18-year-olds. The feedback we've had from those people we've partnered with is that they leave with practical examples that can be implemented in classrooms and schools the next day. The goal of Visible Learning for Mathematics is to support educators to inspire our next generation of mathematicians, to inspire them to be problem-seeking, self-aware, collaborative, fluent, and flexible. If you are interested in hearing more about what Corwin offers and visible learning for mathematics, or partnering with us to design classroom experiences that maximise student learning, then please come and visit us, the Corwin team, during the conference. We would love to partner with you to put into action the right approach at the right time so that you can even more confidently make decisions for your learners. Thank you for your time. May your mathematical moments be magical as you make maths matter. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and for anyone who's curious, it was 2.82 kilograms. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. It is now my great honour to introduce our keynote speaker for the primary conference, Penny Crossland. I heard Penny present at last year's conference and was inspired by what she had to say. As an established primary school teacher, Penny has taught a range of year levels across different schools in the independent sector of WA. She has worked as a curriculum coordinator, a sessional academic for Curtin University, and has collaborated with ASWA and SCARSA to complete action research projects and write sample teaching and learning programs. In 2017, Penny was the state winner for the National Excellence in Teaching Awards. Recently, Penny presented at the Maths Association of Victoria Making Connections Maths Conference in Melbourne. Penny has a passion for inquiry and integrating cultures of thinking into all mathematics lessons to encourage deeper thinking and knowledge among her students, and this will be the focus of her involvement at the conference. Please join me in welcoming Penny to the stage for I know what will be an inspiring and thought-provoking keynote address.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you to MAWA for having me today and to Corwin for the sponsorship. It's my absolute pleasure and privilege to be here with you today. Listening to that bio, I think it sounds impressive, but really I'm just an educator trying to do the best I can every day to help the children that I teach learn as much as they can, to prepare them for the world that they're going to be in. And that's what this conference is about today. And the slides that I have here today are going to be made available. So if you're an avid note taker, you're welcome to go ahead, but you will also have access to these slides. The other thing is you should have access to a handout that looks like this. There's a whole heap over on these tables if you've missed one. Currently, I am working as a teacher at Guildford Grammar School. I have a class of Year 3 children who are hopefully working hard right now without me. I'm not too sure. It's getting towards the end of the year, and I don't know about you, but things felt like they were starting to unravel a tiny bit on Friday afternoon. And when that happens, I think I'm really grateful that my school is allowing me to experience professional learning and invest time and money for me to be absent from the classroom. And I hope that's your journey too. Good morning. Hands up if you are a morning person. What is it like? I've often wondered, because I'm not, and people in the room that know me know that I don't wake up well. Is it nice? Are you happy to be here? What about if you're an afternoon person? Oh, and you're going to hit your straps this afternoon in those afternoon workshops. Yes. Evening? No, oh, no one. Okay. Well, I have to say, if you're not a morning person, I'm sorry, because this is an active keynote session. So you will be talking, you will be collaborating, and that's what my face would probably look like. But we're doing it, people. It's going to be great. So if you are by yourself, or there's only one or two of you on the table, you might like to move to be with someone, because talking by yourself can be lonely. So if you need to move, you can now. Okay, our objectives for today's session. We're going to talk a bit about the general capabilities and critical and creative thinking as a whole. I'm expecting that I'm talking to a room of people that already know a lot about that space, so we're just going to quickly revise it and then move into critical and creative thinking and critical and creative thinking routines. I'm going to give you some examples of what that looks like, what it could look like in your classroom, and that will be applicable whether you're in a kindergarten or pre-primary room or whether you're in a Year 6 or even beyond in your role. we're linking the presentation to the AITSL standards, so if you needed further justification to your boss about why you're here and why it's important to come back next year, you might want to pop those numbers down. On your handout, there is a piece of paper that says colour, symbol and image. And I'd just like you to stop for a second and think, when you think of maths, if you closed your eyes and someone said mathematics, what colour comes to mind? Maybe an image or a picture comes to mind, but what colour comes to mind? And can you write that colour for me in the box of colour? And now that you've done a colour, when you're thinking of maths, what is a symbol that comes to mind? If you're thinking of mathematics, what symbol? Just one? The kids always ask me, can I have lots? Nope, just one. Make a choice. And draw it for me in the middle box, please. So maths, we're often thinking about lots of different symbols, but do we think about images and pictures? I'd like you to think about an image now. It might be yourself involved with maths, it might be something to do with mathematics, and you can draw it in the box for me. If drawing's really not your thing, you could write a really detailed description of what the image would be. And when you're done, can you share with the people on your table what you've done, what you've written? I'm going to bring you back in now. Oh, beautiful listening, everyone. So much better than my normal Monday listeners. What you just did there is a thinking routine called a CSI, or a colour symbol image. And this is a little picture of one that's actually up on my classroom wall at the moment. CSIs are a thinking routine which help us to identify ideas and represent big ideas using colour, using symbols, using image. And then you're justifying and explaining your reasons for those choices as you're exploring ideas. A way that I've used a CSI is on the very first day of school to find out my children's opinions and understandings and feelings about mathematics. Very interesting to see what students draw as their symbols and their images to find out what they're thinking about maths. Let's be real though, we're primary school teachers, and a CSI can be used for any subject, for anything that you do. The whole point of a thinking routine is it's a vehicle, so it's something that you can use a multitude of ways and multiple times. In this particular one, I batched the task similar to you and gave my children one piece of paper at a time to keep it exciting and keep it going. It was their very first time they'd done a CSI. Now if we do one, we just fold a paper in 3 and get going and go super quick. I also always try and encourage the children's voice in their learning, and that's why you can see the explanation up there is written by a child and not by me. It's also good to outsource labour. So in the West Australian curriculum, students develop critical and creative thinking as they learn to generate, evaluate knowledge, clarify concepts, ideas. We're listening to lots of words that are quite mathematical words. You're seeing that I've bolded them. It's really integral to activities that require students to think broadly. It's really important to prepare them for the world that they're about to move into or that they're living in, but they're going to need to work in. And it is something that's actually mandated for us to do. So it's not a choice that we're doing critical and creative thinking. It's one of the 7 general capabilities that we should be teaching and embedding in our learning. You might be more familiar with this wheel here, which is directly from the School Curriculum and Standards Authority. You can see there that it's broken into 4 main parts, and I'm bringing that up because that will come up later in the work that I show you. I use that kind of template to, I guess, grow my work and my understanding as a teacher of critical and creative thinking. It's not something we can ignore, critical and creative thinking. If we want our students to be prepared for a workforce and a world that's constantly changing, we need to equip them with skills that encourage them to think outside the box and not just give them knowledge. We need to be thinking today, how will we engage and encourage our children in critical and creative thinking? But also, how will we link it to the curriculum that we need to be teaching, which is our proficiency strands? For a long time, and I know I'm standing here now as someone who's done a lot of work in the maths space as a teacher, if my high school teachers knew I was up here, they would be laughing, possibly for hours, because I did not understand maths as a high school student, and largely it was because we worked in the fluency space. I was taught algorithms, and I remember asking my Year 11 teacher why I was learning sequences and series and why I might need them, and I wasn't. I think she thought I was being facetious. I was just trying to figure out what is the real world example that I would need to learn this formula for. And she said, oh, I'll get back to you. And the next day she said to me, oh, if you ever work in a bank, you'll need it to calculate repayments for a mortgage loan. I went and worked in a bank for 3 years after I left school. I never used it once. And I can tell you that because I still wasn't quite sure how to do it. So I worked a lot in the fluency space, but didn't have true understanding. I did not have problem solving, and I didn't have reasoning. And that's actually what got me into working a lot in the maths space as a teacher, is I didn't want any child to have that confusion around maths that I had had. Once I started at university, I developed a true love for mathematics, for the patterns and the real worldness of it and the art form that it is. And I love sharing that now. So the maths curriculum actually provides us with the perfect opportunity to teach maths through critical and creative thinking, and it's mandated, and we need to join topics together and teach them together. But we also have recommendations coming out, like the one from Gonski, that tells us that maths strengthens the development of general capabilities, and that general capabilities are being amped up now in the curriculum. For a while they've been forgotten about because we don't necessarily report on them, but they're very, very important and vital for our learners. Look what happens when you have fluency without reasoning and understanding. You get swindled out of 28 bucks. There's 2 ways to engage students in learning maths. One is that we can show students methods and repeat them, and the other is to engage them in rich open tasks. And the second approach we know is much more effective. However, a lot of research shows that teachers feel they don't have the time and opportunity to do that. So that's what this presentation is about, is to take the curriculum standards and the list of methods that you might have seen in textbooks and not show them just briefly to students, but actually develop open-ended, rich tasks that engage students in the important acts of choosing and making connections. There's a lot of research to say that this is really vital. Maths learning environments that encourage students in these activities have a vast impact on students going forward for a long time. So then I guess the answer is, what can we do as teachers to offer those opportunities? And according to a lot of research, there's 3 different things. One is how we present content, how we model it, and how we encourage our students to be creative. And a lot of the things that we're talking about today will be about creativity and curiosity in our students. Because as teachers, critical thinking is purposeful thinking. It encourages those traits, and it encourages reflection and metacognition, and it actively involves every child in the learning process. We want students doing maths with questions that have more than one right answer, with maths that's not about ticks on a page, it's about something much deeper than that. Before I go any further, I just wanted to draw your attention to some resources that I have used heavily. The CSI routine that I talked about just then has come from this book. I absolutely love this book, and if you search visible thinking core routines, you will actually find a lot of the routines and the information on the internet. On the very back of your handout is a bunch of thinking routines, which I'll refer to as well. There's information there about different thinking routines, and these have all come from this book. Ron Richart and Mark Church in particular make a lot of things available, and I've actually had the privilege of working at a school where Mark Church worked with our school on these thinking routines and realised what a generous person he is with knowledge. The whole idea is that these are vehicles for your students, so you can do one of these activities and you can use it multiple times. Something that Church talks about is something called the map of understanding, which is not a program, it's a culture of thinking in students. And if you take nothing away from this presentation, perhaps you can take away these 8 questions. They're not in a bunch of steps, they're not in a hierarchy, they are different questions to encourage thinking in your students. I have put a photo there of my teaching space. That's a little panel of wall that's near the back of my classroom, or the side of my classroom, that the students don't really see, but I see a lot. And I have those questions on display and I use them in math sessions all the time. I will ask children questions to push them further. So if I'm feeling stuck, those questions are quite a good resource and they're a good starting place. If you Google, they're available very openly. These are some great resources, and remember the slides will be available so you can have access to them. Something I absolutely love is the open-ended maths activities book. You might be familiar with an older version which is blue. It is a great buy for your school. It links in a whole heap of high challenge, low risk activities which can start critical and creative thinking with more than one answer. Great for lesson openers, great for assessment activities, great for all sorts of things and different levels. So you could buy that book and use it whatever classroom and year level you are in. The book over is called Mindset Mathematics. It's a Jo Bowler resource. It's very new, released I think this year. She's done resources from year 3 to 6. Jo works in UCubed in the maths space in America. Amazing articles and resources. She is apparently developing, or they are apparently developing, younger year levels soon. Power of Inquiry is an amazing Kath Murdoch book which informs most of my teaching practice. There's an ASWER resource called Check the Clues, which is written by David Dunstan, who's presenting, I think, in the next session, and Dr. Paul Swan. And there's also Dr. Paul Swan's website there. If you don't know who Paul Swan is, then I would say he's our local. He's one of the most generous and knowledgeable primary maths educators out there. Any PD that you ever see with his name on is always money well spent. Very, very generous in knowledge, very, very practical in terms of the types of things you can achieve in your classroom. I've also put on some websites there that are resources that I go to for interesting pictures and problem-solving questions and different things that are worth checking out. And they're there for you just to look at. I've said that maths is about being curious, so I thought I'd show you my mystery maths jars. I have a lot of fun with mystery maths jars. And I'm wondering if you just have a look, this one's full of plastic bugs. This one is a deconstructed necklace, thanks to my 4-year-old nephew. So have a little chat on your table. What could you use these for in a maths classroom? 30 seconds, go. We love to play with things, don't we? I think sometimes people think in maths concrete resources are only for young children. It's like the play stuff before you move on to the real maths. Anyone brave and want to share an idea? Some of those morning people. Estimating how many are in a jar. Love it. Counting. Anyone else? Race cars down the ramp, yep, did happen. Classifying, yep, absolutely. I'll come back to you in a moment with what we used them for the other day in our classroom. Something else that is powerful to do in your classroom is to think about using your success criteria or your learning statements as a question rather than an objective. By turning something from a statement into a question, you actually naturally involve the student or the person involved. So I've turned ours quickly into questions. And they can be used as lesson reflections or touch points at the beginning or end of a lesson. Here's an example of one from my students earlier this year, and we've got how do we read graphs to get information. So that was a question, and then we answered that at the end of the session together. Actually, this was the start of a data unit that we did in a Year 3 classroom, and we started just with this picture on the board. This image is taken from that Mindset Matters book that I talked about. I am a big fan of taking someone's resource and trying to use it a few different ways. If you're going to be spending all that time prepping something, you might as well use it a few different ways. So we started with this image on the board just like this, and the children of course thought this was a graph about colours, favourite colours. So then I showed them this and said, oh, okay, what do you think? They're like, oh, length of colours. What do you mean? Someone thought, oh, you could lay the colours down, like how many people liked the colours, and that was how many centimetres it was. Length of pencils in my tub. Okay, that stands to reason. Blue's really short, brown's quite long. Then I showed them this. They're like, oh, yeah, of course, animal heights. Centimetres, they're like, yeah, possum works, peanut, oh, human. No, can't be animal heights. And eventually they were so excited by this point, there were children jumping up on the PowerPoint, and we realised it was animal tongue lengths. So we were so excited by that point, we had decided what the graph was about. I distributed the graph, and in little groups they wrote everything they knew about graphs for me onto the sheet. And after that, that was my sort of little pre-test to see what do they actually know about graphs, and then I gave them their own little bit of data about animals. We were also doing biological sciences at the time, so it linked in, and got them to represent their data. Now this is a key change for me, because if I had have done this 3 years ago, I would have asked the children to represent what they knew on a graph. But I've learnt that the language I use impacts the children's teachable moments and their curiosity. So I said data, and rather than just putting out 1 centimetre graph paper, I put out blank paper. I put out the paper I thought you should use, which was the graph paper. I put out large box paper. I put out post-it notes, and you can see that the children used a range of things. So part of enabling children to be curious is actually loosening things that you don't even, bonds on things that you don't even maybe realise you're doing. And that was a big moment for me that Joe Bowler helped me achieve. So you can see there that they have all got very different looking graphs. The group in the middle, the epic bar graphs, nothing like the ego of a Year 3 child, actually do understand quite a bit, knew a lot about scale. If you go to the top left corner, they just thought that all you had to do was write the numbers of whatever the category was. So their scale starts like 2, 3, 5, 8, 20, 40, 90, 100, and it's all spaced evenly. So straight away I've learnt that they don't know scale. And we actually looked and posed questions about the graphs, and their questions were very basic and didn't actually show a great understanding of how to interpret a graph. So from that, I kind of had an exit ticket using the WALT from before, reflecting what they knew. And that started our data unit. And from that, we started using our mystery maths jars, and we used them for data. And I literally just got, in pairs, children to come and get jars off the floor, and they showed me, after a little bit of teaching, what they knew about graphs. These boys here have taken 2 types of erasers and sorted them into types. They've tallied them, you can see they've graphed them. The boys on the very left with the graph that I've got there, they actually used the cars and raced how far they could go down. So much oral language, so much talking in this space, and the learning was really quite incredible just from a couple of things that we bought from Kmart. The other thing about our teaching is we have the privilege as primary teachers, most of us, to loosen the bonds of our literacy block, to loosen the bonds of our other projects that we're doing and actually integrate things. And something that I've learned, and I need to reference Andrea Hilbrick here, she's an amazing English educator and runs professional development. She talks about using mentor texts to promote an idea and promote curiosity and engagement. And one thing she suggests is actually launching a text by wrapping it up and creating excitement for the start of a unit. So you can see I've wrapped one up there. It says 2-3C. I have got stickers and things on there. And looking at the pictures on the table, does anyone want to guess what we were about to launch into? Yeah. Yep, multiplication arrays. Wasn't a trick question. But it's trickier if you're 8. And you can see my students here are doing a See, Think, Wonder, which I'll talk to in a moment, about what they think that we're going to be learning about. And we then unveiled that text and used it to promote curiosity, 100 hungry ants, and we did a whole unit of work based on that and arrays and learning. But it was about setting up, and I had on the table for days without that book wrapped up. I had all the resources out, and I had a note saying something exciting is coming. And they kept saying, what is it? What is it? What's it going to be? And so it was about launching and making them excited and curious about that learning. I wanted to talk quickly about a project that I was involved in using critical and creative thinking, and the information is actually in your handout in the middle pages. Remember that I said that SCASA has that lovely image of the critical and creative thinking broken into 4 parts in a wheel. And I've taken those and put them, with the help of someone else, into a wheel. So about 4 years ago, I was approached by the Association of Independent Schools of Western Australia to participate in an action research project. And it was to do with anything in mathematics, and I chose the critical and creative thinking space and looked at, well, I'm grappling with the fact that I know critical and creative thinking is important, but I don't quite know how to do it. And particularly when it comes to reflections or thinking about our thinking and metacognition, I'm just going back to the same things I've always used, and they're very teacher controlled. And everything I've been reading about is that the students need to own it, and it needs to come from their curiosity. So how do I do it, and what do I do? So I knew the kind of things that I wanted to achieve, but I didn't actually have a way of how to do it. And that's when I met up with Kristen Humphreys from ASWA, who was heading up the project, and she helped me come up with this wheel of information and things that we wanted to achieve. You can see in the middle that it has a bunch of the critical and creative thinking information, and then it breaks it down. And we're going to go through that as we talk. So if you look at the red section, you'll see it says inquiring, identifying, exploring and organising information ideas, and then I've broken it down into posing questions or identifying and clarifying information, so they're the sub-elements, and then it goes down into the skills that actually uses. And that third panel is really important because I just didn't even know what skills the elements were after. And then from there, if you have an understanding of what skills you're trying to do, then it's a lot easier to create teaching programs to empower your learners to achieve those things. So if you look at the red section, and I've got it up on the board, it talks about the CSI that we did. And that was about identifying and selecting and clarifying information. And it fits into the wheel of the critical and creative thinking. Another one that does is an activity called Chalk Talk. I know that there's a group of people over here that know what it is. Do other people, have you heard of Chalk Talk? Like a brainstorm, starts off with a question from you in the middle, and it's an open-ended discussion on paper, and it ensures all students are heard, and it gives thinking time. The only thing you want to think about this particular thinking routine, if you've got children who can't write, and I don't mean can't write in a year 1 level, like if you're, it's okay at your year 1 level, but if you've got a child in year 4 that it has huge literacy issues, they're disadvantaged by this task. So just keep that in mind. But basically you put an idea on a paper and the children divide up like with a normal brainstorm and silently start working. Give them all a different coloured texter. Their texters are doing the talking. My class actually call it texter talk. And you give them the chance to answer the question and write down everything that they want to say. After they've written it down on the first sort of brainstorm, you might give them 5 minutes. You then want to move the group. Now, I always make the questions, there's one quite easily accessible question, and there's usually a red herring question out of, say, if you do 4 questions. So you rotate the children, and the way I do it is that when we get to the next rotation, the first thing they do is read all the answers, and they put a star next to any answers they agree with. If they disagree with an answer, then they put a question mark, but they can't just put a question mark, they actually need to justify their position. So you're seeing straight away it's deeper, and it's using vocabulary in maths to justify a position. And the third thing they can do is actually draw connections between ideas. So you might be able to see lots of lines on the paper, and that's the children making connections between different ideas. When I first taught this in a Year 2 class, I started by only doing the stars the first day we did it. So we did the brainstorm, and then we just starred ideas that we agreed with for the other rotations. When I've taught it in a Year 3 or 4 class, I just introduce the steps as we rotate. So the first rotation we did the star, the next rotation I said, okay, now we're going to add an extra challenge. We're going to add questions, and modelled it. And then the last rotation was connections. Any higher, and you know they can do it all. They can handle multiple instructions. But it really is a routine that encourages the children to think about their thinking and question. It's a great launch, and it's a great summary. We used a See, Think, Wonder routine when we did the multiplication prediction activity. Now, a See, Think, Wonder does not have to be written. It could be done on a map. What do you see? What do you think about it? What does it make you wonder? I used a See, Think, Wonder thinking routine and a Chalk Talk thinking routine. They were the only 2 thinking routines I used all term 1 with my Year 3s this year. You don't want to go too hard and use 50 different types of routines. You can use 1 or 2 across lots of content areas and in lots of different ways. In this particular one, don't we love Bunnings and their paint chips? We drew little eyes and wrote what we could see, then we drew a think bubble, and then we wrote a question, and we've done a See, Think, Wonder that way. So that was the start. What do you think you see? And you can see that children have written things like everything is in rows, everything is coloured, I'm wondering what we will be learning. I think we'll be learning about arrays. So they're thinking about what they're seeing rather than me telling them. And I thought I'd show as well, because I know she's here. I had a prac student earlier this year, and she used a See, Think, Wonder routine for 3D shapes. And she used concrete materials, real life materials, as well as nets and images, and the children rotated around looking at what they could see and think and wonder. Maybe if you were a Year 1 teacher or a foundation teacher, a See, Think, Wonder might look like a Wondering Wednesday type of activity, or you spend your week wondering about something. I know of some Year 1 teachers who used to start every Wednesday with an artefact on the table for maths, and when they came in the morning, the children would write everything that they wondered about that artefact. So a pile of money on the table, what could they see, what did they think, what did they wonder? And you're seeing how the literacy and the maths are embedded together as well as the thinking. By the end of the year, the children were busting through the doors every Wednesday, and children were bringing their own artefacts and maths in to share. It was really, really exciting for those teachers involved. In Year 5 or 6, you could do things like walk around with images and post-it notes and totally open it up that way. It is so easily reshaped for any lesson, for any learning area. Sometimes we just do things because they just come up and we just think of how to do it. My favourite question to ask the kids is just prove it. If you think that, prove it. Or give them, children love proving you wrong, so you write them a statement. Miss Crossland doesn't think addition and subtraction are connected. What do you think? Can you prove that she's right or prove that she's wrong? Little questions like that. What makes you say that? How do you know that? It's that extra step and just taking the time to ask it. Those orange squares there are a student using the vocabulary of maths to justify ideas. They're just laminated pieces of paper. We'd written measurement words on them. We were looking at measurement, and we were trying to find connections between the different words of measurement. We know that in maths, a major block for a lot of students is the vocabulary. They don't understand the language of maths, and they don't understand how to integrate it, and so they're getting questions wrong just because they're misunderstanding the vocabulary. Often when I start a lesson, I'll start by brainstorming all the vocabulary involved in the topic that we're doing, and we spend a lot of time coming back to that. And this activity was then taking that vocabulary and finding the connections for it and explaining it. If I was cleverer, I would have done hexagons or pentagons because there'd be more edges and we could make more connections. But we use squares and it works just fine. A blank piece of paper and writing about what you've learnt is also critical and creative thinking. Having some kind of maths journal, because all you're doing is getting them to think about what they have done, talk about what they have done. Anyone use Seesaw? Voice recordings. In the yellow thinking wheel, which is primarily on the reflection space, the reason why I wanted to focus on this today is because I think as teachers, we often leave out the consolidation and the reflection part of a lesson. We get busy and the recess bell goes and then we go, oh, go, 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 pack it up, go, go, go. And it's the first thing to go. But actually reflecting and thinking and processes means that students will be learning for the future. So we need them to be remembering what they're learning so that they are talking about what they're learning and they're also consolidating that. I think about 70% of knowledge is lost if a consolidation for a lesson is not done. Check the Clues is a resource that was created by David Dunstan and Paul Swan, and it integrates the proficiency strands with maths content knowledge for year levels. They are totally differentiated resources. They are incredible resources, and they do things like give a bunch of cards on graphs and get students to find those pictures and match the clues. So they've got to discriminate information, but they've been very, very clever in how they've created these resources, because the resources are using the proficiency strands and the language for that year level along with the content. An issue that we need to be aware of in maths sometimes is that sometimes the problem-solving language required is far beyond the content for the students, and it's a roadblock. You can see some students solving this here. I would also encourage use the information more than once. So when I used this, the first time I used it, I just gave out the little graphs and got the kids to write what the graph could be about and interpret the graph, write some questions about it, and then we solved the clues. If you're an upper primary teacher, I think the lowest I'd go with this is about year 3. Something like a claim support question, making students make a claim about something and then using evidence to support it. The question could be done by the students, or it could be done by the student themselves or another student. In this example, I have just put, there's post-it notes on there because a student is walking around, they're walking around to each other's and writing questions. Reflecting on learning. Something like just the opportunity to explain thinking is really, really powerful. I love Seesaw because it enables me to get oral explanations from students, and it gives me an easier understanding of what they are thinking, and I can listen to it in my own time. If you're using voice recordings, do make sure you use a time limit, won't you? We all learn that the hard way when someone rabbits on for 5 minutes about chance and data. This is about probability, and I had hoped to find the recording. I had a student actually use the thinking routine, I used to think and now I think. So that change in thinking, that growth mindset. I actually prefer now doing first thinking, second thinking. I'll often get children to write up their first thinking, rule up their page in half. First thinking, this is what I think multiplication is, or this is what I think probability is. And then at the end of the lesson, they'll do their second thinking. I like that because it honours their first idea as well as their second.
I think it's unlikely to get a yellow because there are 8 greens and 3 yellows. That's why I think that it's unlikely to pull out a yellow.
And so straight away I can hear his understanding of maths language. I can hear very easily that he's at standard for that outcome that we're trying to achieve. And then we can also use that to share with each other and learn from each other. So we're scaffolding one another, because that zone of proximal development, very, very important in our students in thinking. Another one is an addition headline. Think newspaper headline, which is a little more abstract for kids than it used to be. with the movement away from print. This was a few years ago. I was working really hard on helping my students understand that algorithms were only one way of solving an addition problem. And we had worked lots and lots and lots about how we're reflecting on what are we learning, how can we represent our understanding and summarise it. It's actually really hard to write only one sentence about what you know. It requires a lot of thinking. We did a lot of modelling. Some of my favourites, there was kids caught on camera learning and using doubles in a game. If anyone knows the name of these kids, please call addition stoppers. I think there was stranded on Addition Island, too many strategies to get off. So you can see their concepts coming through. And just a strip of paper, you could laminate it and use them all year. Another way, this is actually a science one, proof that you can use them across all learning areas, on a post-it note. Don't post-it notes make life really exciting when you're a child? I reckon every book list should have post-it notes and playing cards on them for maths or for any subject. They're very, very useful. So I want to talk about some of the benefits of using critical and creative thinking, because there's so many benefits that I've found. Top one as well for me as an educator, it's been so engaging, encouraging, exciting and inspiring watching my students learn and work through maths in this way and through all their learning in this way. It's changed the teacher that I am, and it's changed the students. They are so excited about learning mathematics. They demonstrate much deeper thinking. And they're making lots of connections to maths content, to the outside world, and to different learning areas and external thinking. I really think that this has encouraged a group of questioners in students, and questioning is very, very important in the world that we're in today. Kids make connections really naturally. I love how critical and creative thinking routines make lessons rich with language and discussion. And I love the growth mindset. I felt a real shift, particularly in girls I've taught in the last 5 years, being really frightened about maths and making mistakes, and maths being about a correct answer, to a real excitement about engaging with it and changing with maths. And that's our responsibility as teachers. So I would hear things come through in recordings, like a problem I had was a mistake I made, something I would change for next time. It was so much richer than what we'd done in the past. However, I don't want to sit here and pretend that it was all rainbows and unicorns, because it certainly wasn't. And there's one thing that really, really shocked me, and that was that the higher end students, some of them did not enjoy critical and creative thinking. Be prepared. There's a student in your class that enjoys getting 100% in mental maths, that really likes all their ticks on their pages, and likes that they actually don't have to think that hard. And you need to be ready for that student, because they won't enjoy the process of, the disequilibrium and thinking deeper and moving forward. However, over the time, I've been using thinking routines since about 2015, and every year there's 1 or 2 students, and most of the time they're girls, just to let you know. There are some boys sometimes, but they work through that and they enjoy it by the end. But a lot of nervousness, a lot of, am I not good at maths anymore because I don't know the answer straight away? What do you mean there's more than one answer? What do you mean you want more than one strategy? What do you mean I have to constantly talk about it? I want to be by myself. So there's some kids that don't like thinking deeply, and we need to work through that with them, and I would recommend working through that with their parents with them as well. Some children go through school when they're good at subjects and they just get given positive reinforcement after positive reinforcement after positive reinforcement, and they're like a tiny little rock that just gets polished and polished and polished and polished all the way until they leave school, and then life's not like that, and they don't actually have the skills and dispositions to make them ready. So it's actually our responsibility to teach these skills and give them feedback on how to improve. So that was one that shocked me, but I sort of expect it now. You need to think about how you're going to teach thinking skills. You need to take time, and as I said, you want to do it slowly. If the one change you made was to go back and use some of those questions on the map of understanding to start, because remember, you're after a culture of thinking, or you might just pick 1 routine or 2 routines to get going and use that to teach your students, and be prepared to model it and talk about what went well and what didn't go well, allocate adequate time to do so. Start now too. Don't think it's something that you need to do in 2020. You can start now. In fact, perfect. You've got like some people that you can test it out on and figure out what went wrong, and then you have it refined for next year. Like I said, I only used 1 or 2 to begin with. You need to think about how will you record or honour their thinking, because critical and creative thinking is about the process, not the product. The product does matter a bit, but it's not the be-all and end-all. So how are you going to acknowledge that thinking that went on? How are you going to see that that thinking went on? Do you need to see it all of the time for every child? Take some pressure off yourself. But with things like Seesaw, with things like butcher's paper and texters and things like that. So you're getting them to record and honour their thinking. And that's the other thing, big fan of making the children do the heavy lifting. So make them do the recording, make them share with each other, make them upload it to Seesaw, make them share it with their parents, and really honour the process all over your classroom. So put up the brainstorm that looks messy, put up the start of the unit work, show that that process is as important, if not more important than the product. If mistakes are okay, then how come we never let them be up on our walls in our classroom? So just be really careful about what you're modelling to your students. Have a think about what you'll need to implement it. Maybe you want to buy Making Thinking Visible. Maybe you want to have staff developed on that and receive information. The great news is nothing costs much money with critical and creative thinking. Some butcher's paper, some texters, and you're ready to go with most things. I wanted to give you some time now to think about your classroom, your context that you're in, a year level that you teach, and I want you to think of, choose a lesson that you might be teaching or a concept that you might be teaching next week. Choose a section of the wheel, and then create an idea or an activity using a thinking routine or a question. So I'm going to give you time to do that now. You've got about 5 minutes to have a go. I'll wander around too. I'll bring you back in. Sorry, I didn't get to everyone.